Welcome to part 2 for your Blender game engine. This time we'll be learning how to move a character. So here's an example, and here's the end example at the bottom. Don't worry, this will make a lot more sense later on. To show you an example, if I press P, my guy moves based on my moving. I'm just moving my arrow keys right now, and I've also learned how to jump. And of course, because he's going into a rigid body, a static plane, it doesn't go. I can jump eventually over it if I get higher enough, okay, and back and forth. So, how do we do this? Well, let's make a new one. So, to start off with, I am going to change to my Blender game. I am also going to deselect and add a plane because we want to make sure the brick or character doesn't just fall off. So I need to move this guy up a little bit. Doesn't really matter if it's too far up because it will move back down. Now, step 1, just like the other video, we're going to change our guy to rigid body, and we also want to do our collision bounds to make sure it's a box. Alright, next part, we are going to be using keyboard controls to move our character, or you can use the WASD if you're familiar with games. So step 1 is we're going to divide this window in half. You see these 3 hashtags? Make sure it has a plus sign, and right away I'm going to click down, not left. Make sure you go down right away and divide it up in half. This window down here, I'm going to change it from our 3D view to Logic Editor. And this is what you're going to get. Now it's pretty small. I know you can zoom in and out using your mouse button if it works. Okay. To get rid of this property panel, just press N. Okay. And it should give us a little bit more space. Okay. We have sensors, controllers, actuators. We only really need to do something in sensors and actuators. Before we start putting information here, we got to make sure we have the right object selected. You got to make sure the cube or whatever character you have is going to be moving. Okay, so let's start off with our sensor. So I'm going to add a sensor, and in this case, you notice there's a lot of different kinds. Okay, but we're going to be using a keyboard sensor because we're using our arrow keys, in my example, to move our cube. So my first one, I will name this one forward because I'm going to make it sure it's going straight. The key I'm going to use, if I click on this, it says press a key. I'm just going to use my up arrow. Okay, and that's all we need to do for this. So right now it knows, okay, that an up arrow means something. Okay, I've added a sensor called up arrow. I need to add an actuator. So in this case, we are going to use a motion. Okay, there's a lot of different ones, but for now, we're going to be just using a motion. Now, right now, you notice that we're on global. So if I rotated, so I press R and then Z and clicked, notice that my green arrow still faces this way instead of facing where the cube is facing. So if I change it to local and press RZ, notice now that the green is, and that's what we want. It makes more sense for it to know to follow along this arrow. So make sure you keep in local. And so then now for my first change, I'm going to set a velocity to move it along the y-axis because I'm going to pretend my y-axis is forward. So if I put 3, for example, okay, it's going to be the speed of 3 when I push up my up arrow. But it does not, they're not connected right now. See these 2 dots? They have to be connected so the computer understands that your up arrow is associated with your motion. So if I click and drag, do not let go of your mouse, and let go, it adds this middle part, which you don't have to worry about right now. And if I press P and I go forward, notice it moves forward. But notice this too. Notice how it slides. Okay, that has to do with your velocity. So I press escape to get out of this. If I don't want it to slide, or want it to slide less, I could leave it here. But for example here, I'm going to press 0. Okay, and now instead I'm going to do a location along the y-axis. In this case, I'm going to do 0.1. Okay, if you make it too big, it's going to fly off way too fast. If I press P now, I press forward. Notice it moves forward, but there is no sliding. Okay, you can obviously do both if you want to have an effect of moving forward and with some kind of velocity. All right, so in this one here, I'm going to also call this one forward, so I know that they're related to each other. I'm going to collapse these two, so I got more room. And I also get another option to add some more sensors. So now we move forward, but it's not good enough. We also have to move left and right, obviously. So I'm going to add another sensor, another keyboard sensor. In this case, I'm going to call it left. In my keyboard here, I'm going to go left. Okay. I'm going to add an actuator. Again, it's going to be a motion. But in this case, I'm just going to make it rotate along the z-axis. Notice the z-axis is up and down, so if I rotate it, and I want to rotate it to the left, so let me go by rotation, z, and let me just put 1 in here and see what happens. So I'm going to connect the two. Okay, if I press P, okay, now notice every time I move my left arrow, it's turning left. If I move my up arrow, it's moving along like that, like a car, and it's working really well. Now, the one thing I kind of forgot to mention is this. We were talking about the local and global axis. I should have in my, if it's just a location, this is fine. If you're also using linear velocity, you want to make sure you also click on the left box here to make sure your linear velocity is bound on your local axis, not your global. All right, so I have done left. I should name this one just to match it up so I know as it gets more complicated. I can obviously keep on adding sensors for right, backwards, and jump like I did in my other example. So for your pre-made models, you want to make sure that your cube or whatever object you want to use can move in all different directions and jump, and add, like I did, a wall of some sort, okay, or stairs or whatever you want to show me that your character can move in different objects. Good luck.